Hello everyone, welcome to Canteen Cup. My name is Scott, and today I want to discuss, come out of her, my people, lest ye partake of her plagues. You know, a lot of us talk about moving out of the cities, moving into the country, moving out to where it's rural, and a lot of us have done it. However, there's still some of you out there that, you know, I've gotten some questions, and it's like, well, how do you do that? I want to do it, but I can't. And I want to address some of that, and I may be a little blunt at times because that's just who I am, and because I'm driving home from being out in the field, I'm going to kind of ramble a little bit. I don't have any notes or anything, but I've been thinking about this as I was out and about. And I can tell you, you know, how I did it, because I just recently have done it again. And I can tell you what I did, and I can give you some ideas, but remember that each of us, our circumstances are different. In other words, what worked for me may or may not work for you. And so you have to take that into consideration. So, you know, the first thing I want to talk about is coming out of her, my people, or the acronym Coomp or Coomp, or however you want to say it, is a verb. It's not a noun, it's a verb. And verbs are action words. That means you have to do something. Okay? So that's the first thing you have to consider is, are you ready to do something about leaving your current situation and moving into a better one? Okay? That's, you know, that's the bottom line. I used to tell my kids that you have to have the gotta wanna. And gotta wanna means you got to want to do it. If you don't have the gotta wanna, it's not gonna happen. So that being said, that's the first thing that you have to consider. Are you prepared to do what it takes and to make the sacrifices? Because there will be some sacrifices, even if it's just time and money, that you will have to make. Are you prepared to do that? Because if you're waiting for the come out of her, my people fairy to come down and tap you on the head with her wand and you're instantly transported out into the sticks, that's not going to happen. So the first thing is, you have to have the gotta wanna. You have to understand that coming out of her, my people, is a verb. It is not a noun. And that you have to be prepared to take the steps to get from point A to point B, so to speak. All right, how that happened for me is when I retired from federal service, I was working up in Washington, D.C. I moved back to my little town in Georgia, and after living there a while, I didn't like it there anymore. It got too crowded. It got kind of urbanized. I didn't like it. And so my wife and I talked about it, and we decided we were going to move. Okay, we made that decision. And then from there, we started taking steps on moving from where we lived to where we wanted to be. So someone says, okay, Scott, that's great, but how do I do it? Okay, again, working from me, the first thing we had to decide was where we wanted to live. Now, I have the type of job where I can work pretty much anywhere in the country I want. We are self-employed. I was not always self-employed, but out of the last 17 or 18 years, I was, you know, self-employed for much of those. And my wife was self-employed for the last 17, 18 years. And so we have our own business, and we could live anywhere we wanted to go. So we took the initiative and said, okay, where do we want to live? And we considered many, many places. We considered the Ozarks. We considered Texas. We considered Wyoming. We considered Missouri. We considered all sorts of places. But where did we end up? We ended up in Georgia, but in a more rural part of Georgia. Now, why did we do that? Well, there's a couple reasons, but one of the main reasons for us was family. As you can tell by the gray beard, I am not so young anymore. And so I had to take into consideration who is going to take care of me when I get older. Excuse me, I'm trying to turn on traffic here. But who is going to take care of me when I get older? Who is going to take care of me now if my wife or myself, we get ill? And we are at that age that sometimes that stuff happens. Both of us are fairly healthy, but stuff happens. So the majority of my family is here in Georgia. Now, my family, when I say my family, I'm talking about my wife and my family. And my side of the family, everyone's pretty much dead. So I don't have anybody. And my wife has a few people still alive. But for us, the majority of people lived here in Georgia, but they were out in a more rural setting. The other thing we considered was infrastructure. How far is it to a hospital? How far is it for us to get the things we need? And, considering our age a little bit, would I have loved to move out into the middle of Wyoming? Yeah, I think that would have been like really cool, but in a practical sense, that may not have been a good idea. I like to watch, Life Below Zero. That's a great show, but that's kind of beyond my reach as an older guy. So, using those factors, we said, okay, now where can we find properties where A, we're still fairly close to family, and B, we can get far enough away from civilization to be considered not living in the city. Well, we looked and we looked, and again, we considered many areas, we considered many pieces of property, and we finally found an area, and we found the property kind of met all our criteria. We don't have a lot of property. Of course, we don't want a lot of property anymore. We have plenty to do just working we've got about 6 acres. We've got plenty to do just on that alone, because ours was vacant land. And so we found a piece of property. Okay, that being said, once you find an area, and you got to do that first. You just can't do a shotgun approach. You got to kind of narrow it down, and then once you decide where you want to live, you have to go and you have to look, and you have to talk to people. You have to talk to real estate agents. You have to go on the internet for real estate agents that are selling property online. It's a verb. You have to go and you have to look, and you have to drive out there, and you have to sit there and say, this is where I want to live. I like this piece of property. It takes homework. It takes work. It's like having a second job. When we say this is hard, it's not that it's really hard. From an intellectual standpoint, it's not that difficult, but you have to, it's an action word, it's a verb. You have to get up, you have to do the work. Now, if you have lots and lots of money, you can hire somebody to do it for you, but most of us don't. We didn't. But we found a piece of property, and And because we were out driving around and we were out talking to people, we found the better piece of property in talking to our now neighbor. When we were out looking at the first piece of property, he says, no, you like this other piece of property better, and we did, and we like it a lot. So you have to get out. You have to first of all decide where you want to live. Then you have to go out and do the homework and find that piece of property. Find your slice of heaven. Nobody's going to do it for you. So once you do that, then you go through the process of purchasing said piece of property. And when you're looking at your property, you have to decide, do I want vacant land? Do I want a house on it? Do I want it cleared? Do I want it wooded? Just remember that the better prepared the land is, the more you're going to pay for it. You know, land is cheap. If you find a cheap piece of land, it's usually not producing. It's not cleared. It's going to take a lot of work to get it to where you want it, but it's cheaper. So that's another thing you have to decide. How much work do you want to do versus how much work you want to have done, and that costs money. So we had a vacant piece of land. Like I said in my past video, we started out, we had a septic tank on it, and that was it. We did a lot of clearing, a lot more clearing. We did put a lot of money into it, and it's just time. Now, let's talk about your current situation. And again, everybody is different. Okay, we purchased a house about 2 years prior to us deciding to move. Now, that 2-year number is important, because if you just bought a house and you have not lived in it for 2 years, then when you sell the house, if you gained a profit, you will be taxed on a capital gain on that property. So your current house, you have to live in at least 2 years. If you're renting, then just whenever your lease is up, but you have to consider your current situation. Again, talking about me, we lived in our house right at about 2 years, and then we had to get it ready to sell, and we put several $1,000s into getting the house ready to sell. We painted, we repaired, we fixed, we replaced, we put a lot of work into that house to get it ready to sell. However, because of all that, we got a premium value for it, and we made enough money to where we can do a lot of work to our property that we were in the process of buying. So, that is something for you to consider. We downsized, we cut down how much money we owe by quite a bit, by quite a substantial amount. Probably 40% less than what we paid for that house to begin with. The other thing you have to consider are, what else are you going to sacrifice? If you buy a cheap farm with a 1940s house that's kind of run down, you're going to have to make the sacrifice of not having, the fancy stuff in your house. You're also going to have to travel a little bit further for things. And so I'm going to stop here and talk about a book. I think it's still in print. It's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And there are 7 habits that you can use to make you highly effective. And the one I'm going to bring up, I forget which number it is, but it's begin with the end in mind. And that's why I was saying, when you make that decision, yeah, we're going to do this, then you've got to envision what your end game looks like. You have to envision where you want to be, doing what you want to do, and then work back from there. So, The same thing with employment. Most people have transferable skills. Most people can do something other than what they're doing. If you can't, then maybe your first step might be to go back to school and pick up a trade of something. If you're young, welding, or become a machinist, or an accountant, or get into the medical field. A lot of those, become a plumber, electrician, a carpenter. Move out into the world, get a trade, get a skill that you can bring with you. Like I said, I did not always work at my current position, but I continued to move myself around until I ended up where I ended up. But it takes gumption. You've got to get up and you've got to do it. So really, I've kind of went a little long on this, and I was kind of painting, as a friend of mine would say, painting in broad strokes. But the takeaway from this is, one, coming out of her is a verb. Two, it takes a lot of work on your part to do it. And you can't sit at night and watch TV and dream about it, because it'll never happen. Then you have to do it. Like I said, it's almost like having a second job between getting your old house ready to move or cleaned up or whatever, to finding a piece of property, finding what you want to put on that property. You have to plan it, you have to think it, you have to figure it, get your, take your socks and shoes off if you need to count. Try to get your money right. This is, no one said this was easy, but everyone I've talked to said it was worth it. And so you have to decide what's best for you and your family. And you have to decide, is this really what you want to do? And again, the blunt part of me is, talk is cheap. So if all you're doing is talking about it, it'll never happen. So quit talking and get moving. You say in the Army, off your butt and on your feet and get moving. And then little by little, and I'm not saying that you're going to do this in 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks, even 2 or 3 months. This could be a long-term project for you, but you'll never get there if you don't start now. Like I've said before, the beginning of a journey starts with the first step. And your first step is deciding you really, really want to do this. And then work from there. In today's world with the internet, there is so much information out there for you all to use. Learn how to use the internet. There's just so much there for you. And learn and do and do. And that's really the important thing. Hard work can make up for a lot of shortcomings. And if you really want to get out there and you really put the effort in, you can make it. Look, I'm an old guy and I did it. And we moved, last summer was hot. Ticks and chiggers. I either had heat exhaustion or near heat exhaustion several times, working my plan. And that's it. Am I done? No, I still have lots of work to do on my property, and it may be a couple of years before I get it right. But I'm working the plan. I'm taking the left foot, putting it in front of the right foot, and then I take the right foot and put it in front of the left foot. You just need to start. Come out of her. Come out of her now. Get started. Start your plan. Start going. Talk to your family. Get everybody on board. Go, go, go. It's the only way you're going to do it. In the meantime, you all stay safe and stay secure. And hopefully we'll see you out there.